Hey there, welcome to the show. From Peterson's, I'm Taylor Sienkiewicz, and you're listening to You Have a Cool Job, a podcast highlighting those who took their profession in a unique direction and what they did to get there. We all know and love college sports, but do we know what goes on behind the scenes? On this week's episode of You Have a Cool Job, we talked to Jason Smith, a college athletic recruiter. Jason is the Director of Recruiting Services for NCSA, Next College Student Athlete. How does someone get into a job like this, you may ask? Of course, it all starts with Jason's personal history as a high school and later college athlete.
My path to being a college athlete really started early in my high school career, where I attended a private school as a freshman and sophomore. But after my sophomore season, I didn't make the cut for varsity to play on the summer team with the high school. So at that point, I really had to make my first adult decision. Do I stay at the high school with a new group of friends that I had created? I was having a good experience there outside of baseball, and not compete in the sport that I love. And that's really all I did.
Yeah.
I didn't play basketball or football or anything else. It was baseball and be a kid and school. So I had the option to transfer to the public school a little closer to home, where I had played with some of those guys growing up, and I had some friends at that school already, and coincidentally my father had coached the varsity coach at the high school as well. So I decided to make the move to Richards, to the public school, and really bet on myself. I was told I wasn't good enough to play varsity baseball, and I didn't agree with that assessment at the time. So really used that as motivation throughout the rest of my high school career, just to be the best player that I could be. And that helped me. I made the team at the new high school. I was a starter from day one with that program, led them to a conference championship. I earned awards. I don't know if it was destiny or what, but the first game I pitched for that school was against my old high school, and we beat them. And then my senior year, we knocked them out of the state playoffs.
Nice.
So it was definitely a much better ending to the story for me than the other side. But when I look back at my experience, that was a defining moment where I went all in on baseball and me as a student athlete, and it really helped me academically too, get focused, because it's okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm obviously going to want to play after high school, which helped me get on the path to getting recruited. I ended up playing Division III baseball at Aurora University. I had a few different offers along the way. One D2 came in with a scholarship offer, another NAIA, a couple junior colleges. But going through that experience in high school of not playing, not making the cut, I was really focused on, okay, I don't want to transfer again, because I know what it's like to have to go to a new place, meet new friends, develop new relationships with coaches, and I did not want to do that again. So my driving force in my search was, is this the right place for me? Can I get my education? Can I have a good baseball experience? Can I realistically play from day one? For me, it wasn't the name on the jersey or having the cool logo that's on ESPN or anything. It's about where I could make an impact, which led me to turning down a D2 scholarship offer and ultimately going to Aurora, where, looking back, had an awesome experience, played for 4 years, was a big part of one of the better Division III programs at the time in baseball. And from there, kind of takes me a little further into the journey, where right after graduation, I wanted to get into college coaching, and I was fortunate enough to land a job a few weeks after graduation at another Division III school. So I got right into the thick of college baseball recruiting. And in coaching, yes, I love practices and the games and the competition, but the part of my 8-year coaching career that I really enjoyed the most was the recruiting element. Meeting new people, trying to help them figure out if this was the right school for them. I coached at 4 different schools, Division III, Division II, and my last 4 years were at the Division I level, so was able to get good experience at all levels of the NCAA. Mm-hmm. But for me and all the programs, our recruiting philosophy was always very aligned. We want the right kids. We want the right families. We want them to come in here and know this is the right place for them, athletically, educationally, financially, all across the board. Because, I didn't coach at any big name schools or, again, with the cool logos. It was smaller schools, smaller institutions. So we were really focused on finding the right fits for our recruiting classes. And then, I got to a point in my coaching career where I had to make a decision. Am I going to be in this long term? I'm getting upper 20s. I got a fiance, starting to think about life, in general, and not just, the next potential conference championship. Mm-hmm. But, at that point, I was fortunate enough to get my master's degree during my coaching time. So I did start to look outside of college baseball for positions while I was also looking for college baseball jobs, head jobs. And that led me to NCSA. So Next College Student Athletes, located in Chicago, Illinois. That's where I grew up. And I had used NCSA as a coach throughout my time, to help with our recruiting. So I was familiar with the company. I was familiar with what they did and their mission. And I saw a job posting, so I threw my name in the hat. And was fortunate enough to get an interview, got the job offer. And actually, I love telling the story. The day that I received the offer from NCSA, I also received a job offer from a college to be a head baseball coach. Mm. So a real turning point in my career where, I looked at all the options and the pros and the cons of doing each. And, I decided to pass on the head coaching opportunity, which was my original goal. Mm-hmm. But I saw so much opportunity with NCSA, with my path, starting out as that high school student athlete who was cut and wasn't sure what my future was in baseball or being a student athlete, having coached at all three levels. I just felt I had so much experience and really passion to help share with the families that NCSA works with that, all things considered, that's the path I chose almost 7 years ago now. And I've had a few different roles at NCSA. I started off as a baseball recruiting coach, working hand in hand with our families through their process. I earned a senior recruiting coach title, and then took over as the baseball and softball recruiting coach manager for a short period. And then now I serve as the director of recruiting services. And I like to think of my role as coaching the coaches at NCSA and making sure they're set up to best impact the recruiting journeys of our families.
Okay, great. So I want to back you up a little bit to transitioning from being a coach to a recruiter, because I know you're doing some recruiting as a coach, but to completely focus on this part that was just an element of your job before, to have that be your whole job. What was that transition like? Did you miss coaching at all, or how did that go?
I absolutely miss coaching right out of the gate. It was a hard transition because it was a completely different world. I went from being on the field 80 to 85% of the time. You're one-on-one. You're out there with your student athletes, and you're just a coach. Mm-hmm. Now I'm at a desk. I'm looking at a computer 100% of the time. Nothing wrong with it. But just that whole environment change was really hard for me. And I did miss it. I missed it a lot because that's all I've ever known was college baseball. I never had a quote unquote real job. I don't really think I have one now, actually, to be perfectly honest, but definitely much more of that feel where you're in an office, there's people around you, you've got goals and metrics and things like that. So my first year was rough, to be completely honest, going through that transition, learning the ins and outs of how NCSA works. And, at that time working with a large load of families that all had wants and needs and needed help in this process. So What helped me get through that time in that transition, number one, were the people at NCSA. Brandon Lyles was the other baseball recruiting coach who still works with me here at NCSA, and Jeff Schlicht was my manager at that point. Those two fellows were really instrumental in me just getting acclimated, getting confident in what I was doing at NCSA. I always had the confidence that I could help our student athletes, but to just make it work in the NCSA model and how they do things at NCSA. So, year one was tough, but it was really around that 12-month mark where I kind of lost the itch to coach. It wasn't there that often. And I really started to develop these relationships with our families and make progress. Like, I started to see the success that, my influence, my guidance, my help in the process was moving them forward. And they were, seeing success with commitments or working through their offers. There were other student athletes who might not have been that far in their process, but were still taking the right steps and feeling the value of the time that they were investing in NCSA and their recruiting. So that really kept me focused through the tough times, and helped me, just get to that point where I knew I was all in at NCSA. It took a little bit, but I think everybody, when you make a transition like that, you go through that process a little differently. But for me, the people at NCSA and the families that we worked with really helped me stay focused through that time.
Yeah, totally. I mean, change is hard. But it sounds like the connection that maybe you were craving that you had with your players, you kind of got with these students that you were recruiting. Is that kind of a bridge there? Yeah.
Yeah, it is, but in a different way. Mm-hmm. When you're a college coach, you see them every day, whether it's in the weight room, on the field, doing class checks, they stop by the office. You're very much a part of their life. And I still have a lot of close connections from players that I coached along the way. At NCSA, it's a little different. Everything we do is online, over the phone. We're not going out and meeting these student athletes face to face. And in the recruiting coach role, there is we have a events department, and they go out and they are on the field. But generally, as a recruiting coach, for most of your student athletes, there's not going to be that face to face contact. It's going to be over the phone. It's going to be in recruiting classes and webinars, a lot of emails and text communication, social media. So it was just getting acclimated with the way of connecting with the families and the rhythm of it to I guess the best way for me to describe it is to help someone become a better hitter. As a hitting coach, you need to spend hours in the cage, thousands of swings, and your coach is probably going to be there for most of them. In recruiting, we can go over a game plan, and I can check in on your progress. I can touch base when I know that there's a coach who's looking for a player like you. It can be more spread out, but you can still develop those close relationships, understand what they're looking to accomplish in the process, both relationships with families and student athletes and college coaches, to help them be successful and find the kids within NCSA. So, there are many families that I worked with year 1, 2, and 3 that I still remember their names. There's 2 student athletes who are on Vanderbilt's roster who just won the College World Series.
Oh, wow.
A few nights ago, who one I happened to meet at an event when he was an 8th grader. Mm-hmm. I didn't work with him during his time at NCSA, but the other one I did. I was able to work with Justin throughout his time at NCSA and developed a really strong relationship with that family. So, not everyone ends up at Vanderbilt or winning the national championship. But those, there are families at many different levels that still stick in my mind.
We'll get back to Jason's story right after this. Are you searching for the right college, grad school, or trade school to fit your needs? Or are you studying for those entrance exams you need a good score on? Peterson's has you covered. With advanced college and scholarship search functions, test prep for everything from the SAT to the MCAT to the firefighter exams, and tons of free resources on our blog, Peterson's helps you find, get in, and pay for school, plus much more. Visit petersons.com today. now, back to the show. Jason explained that NCSA is one of the bigger names in the industry, so many high school athletes come to them for help. I asked Jason about the process that happens after a student approaches his team, and he said it all starts with talking about the student and family's goals.
For us, it's realistic goals with a realistic timeline are very important. Part of our core values is direct and honest feedback and communication, and sometimes we do have to have fairly difficult conversations with families about schools that they match up with. Some families, they've got the D1 or bust mentality, which I had as a prospect, and I always reflect back on my own experience because that could have held me back. But once I realized you can have a good experience at other levels, and it's really about finding the right place for you. If it is a Division I program, great. If it's an NAIA program or Division II, that's okay too. You can still have an awesome athletic experience, still get a great education, hopefully not incur too much debt along the way. And the way we term it is that college decision. It's not just a 4-year commitment; it's a 40-year commitment, because that's how long that decision is going to impact your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Jason, tell me about some times when you had a really impactful moment with a student, like that made what you do all worth it, or makes you really enjoy your job.
So there's a lot out there, and I'm a little disconnected from the one-on-one connections now, because in my director role, I'm definitely not on the phones and working one-on-one with families as often. But reflecting back to the families, a lot of times it's not even like that they got a scholarship offer or that they made that decision. It's along the way. It's just the joy that you can hear of they made that connection, that, hey, the plan worked. I've heard back from this coach. I went to the camp, followed the game plan, and I've got a call scheduled for next week. What do we do now? They want more. They feel the success. They feel the value that we can provide at NCSA. And for a lot of families, there's many, many moments like that. I've been at NCSA for 7 years, so there's a lot of families that we help. There's also, I guess on the flip side of this, and it's worth noting, there's one student athlete that always pops in my mind, and it's a kid from Illinois, actually south suburbs of Chicago, who we worked very closely together. He was big on academics. Mm-hmm. So he wanted to go to college. He knew what he wanted to study, business. He wanted to have a strong business education at the school he was going to. Really focused on the D1 element of it. Now, after a year or two, you kind of can project and say, hey, Jack, you know what? That might be a stretch athletically for you. Mm-hmm. So let's start developing other options. And to make a long story short, he ended up with multiple Division III options with decent business programs, but they want him to come play on the team. We also worked with Jack on applying to some larger schools that had bigger, more prominent business programs. And at those schools, they had club baseball. Not your traditional path, but for most student athletes, it's good to have a spread of options at the end. So okay, I've got my baseball options. I've got some options where it's just academic, but maybe it is stronger on the academic side. So you can make the best decision and really make the right choice for you and the path that you want to go down. And that was the case with Jack, where he had a few baseball options. He narrowed down his academic option to the University of Illinois, knew he wasn't going to play there, but we talked about the walk-on process and how to get set up for that, and if it doesn't happen, how do you connect with the club team. And ultimately, at the end, he decided to go that route and essentially turned down opportunities to play college baseball. But even after that, I got a message from his mom, who was just so grateful of the guidance and support and opportunities that we were able to connect with for him, even though he didn't go that route. Jack was able to make the right choice for him. It just so happened to be that at that point in time, it was an academic route, but he could still go through and have a baseball experience at that school. So, yes, the main goal is to get them playing college baseball, but families might define success differently than each other.
As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, everyone knows about college sports, but not everyone understands the ins and outs of how these athletes are recruited. I asked Jason to dispel some of the misconceptions people have about the athletic recruitment process.
I think in general, people just, they miss that recruiting just doesn't happen. You know, a lot of families and a lot of prospects think, hey, I'm the best player on my high school team or on my club program. Things are going to happen. You know, it's so competitive now. You know, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of student athletes in some sports who play high school. Not all of them want to play collegiately, but it's a pretty competitive environment. So, you know, being the best athletically doesn't necessarily mean you're going to end up at the best school, or the school that you want to. Because there's other kids competing for that, not just with their ability or their academics, but the effort they're putting into the process. A reality of recruiting outside of your big time D1s for most sports is that recruiting budgets are shrinking on the coach side. So they don't have the funds to get out to every event. They don't have the funds to fly out and see you at a high school game if it's an out-of-state school, or even drive there. So, you know, for most sports, scholarships are limited and very tough to come by. So, you know, that's part of it too. A lot of families think, oh, he'll get a scholarship and school will be paid for. If you're outside of basketball and football and like major D1 opportunities, there's a good chance that even if you are fortunate enough to receive an athletic scholarship, it's going to be partial. General advice that I have for families is get started early, even if it's just researching schools and opportunities, you know, understanding who's in your area, in your state, what their programs are like in your sport, you know, working with your student athlete on, you know, academic choices and really staying diligent with your academics early in the process. That's one of my regrets from my high school career. Looking back, I love the choice I made in moving schools and betting on myself. It worked out for me. That decision also got me in gear academically because I was coasting at the other school. And had I done that, I probably wouldn't have gotten the academic scholarship that I got from Aurora University where I ended up. I wasn't a straight A student by any means, but I cleaned it up and got that GPA as high as I could and the ACT score as high as I could. Nothing derails recruiting more than bad academics. That's something they cannot recruit around. So it's important from day one. Transcripts matter. Every class matters. And you don't have to be a valedictorian to play collegiately, but if you're below a 2.0 GPA, that makes it really hard.
Jason has been in the business of college sports for a long time. And while he shifted his career, he's been able to specialize in a unique field. We hope you're inspired by Jason's story to use your experiences to help others too. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.